Good morning, USA, and welcome back to That 70s Report. I'm Maggie Nguyen,
I'm Jessica Tran.
And I'm Blake Ryan.
and we're coming to you live from the 70s. Here's some speaking headlines today.
Well, Maggie, it's hard to think about anything that is affecting our economy more right now than our state of stagflation.
I agree, Lake, that the stagflation we're seeing has brought persistent high inflation, high unemployment, and stagnant demand.
Yes, this is definitely a very pressing issue right now. Do we know what's causing this?
Much of the stagflation is from an oil crisis we witnessed, with oil prices spiking ever since the ban on oil exports from Arab countries to the U.S. because of our support for Israel in the Arab-Israeli War in 1973.
In the late 1979, the price of West Texas Intermediate crude oil skyrocketed, peaking in the spring of 1980 at nearly $150 per barrel in 2024 dollars.
The crisis led to job losses and a decline in consumer spending on American products, further weakening the economy. Meanwhile, federal spending increased due to Great Society reforms.
And during this time, Richard Nixon was elected president, bringing in his new approach to federalism.
That's right, Maggie. Nixon introduced new federalism, which aimed to shift power away from the federal government and give more control to the state and local governments. He believed states were better equipped to address local issues and tried to reduce the government's direct involvement in social programs.
Despite this, the federal spending remained high. In 1961, the federal government had spent $94.4 billion, and in about 10 years that rose to $196.6 billion. Nixon had to navigate the cost of the Vietnam War and domestic programs like the Social Security and Medicare, which continue to expand.
Speaking of the economy, Nixon also made a huge decision in 1971 known as the Nixon shock. It had a 90-day wage and price freeze to try to slow inflation.
Exactly. Nixon took the U.S. off the gold standard, meaning the dollar was no longer backed by gold. This, however, was unsuccessful.
President Ford tried to cut out government spending. He initially combined that with tax hikes, but that kind of tanked the economy. So then he tried to, for some tax hikes, but that didn't work either.
He initially combined that with tax hikes, but that kind of tanked his
It was a time of stagflation and high unemployment, fixing both problems at the same time, and Ford focused more on inflation than unemployment.
Exactly. President Ford attempted to tackle inflation with his Whip Inflation Now campaign, urging Americans to cut spending and save more, which Americans did not buy into.
And so, unsurprisingly, he was not reelected in the 1976 election.
Well, Maggie, people just do not seem happy with how the U.S. economy is right now.
Not only are they not happy with the economy, but they're also not happy with the state of the U.S. During this period. We've seen an outbreak in protests and activism, likely onset by the success of the civil rights movement. Another marginalized group fighting for justice are.
Wait, hold on just a second there, Maggie. I'm getting some reports of a protest coming from outside. I'll get back to you at the scene.
Hello, Maggie. Behind us, demonstrators were advocating for women's civil and equal rights.
Well, Jessica, have these protesters been successful in achieving any of their goals for reform?
Through lots of effort and long time of making their voices heard, many of these protesters and organizations fighting for civil rights have been seeing results. One of them being the women's rights activists have been successful in the 1972 landmark decision of Roe v. Wade, which legalized abortion nationwide, promoting a woman's right to bodily autonomy.
Well, Jessica, it's sure important to note that there's been a great deal of progress in this decade, and women especially have been advocating for a long time for equal rights and treatment. The 70s have only opened this door further.
Yes, that's right, Blake. Now, back to our regular scheduled broadcasting.
Thank you for that, Jessica. Another emphasis of these protests has been getting equal rights for African Americans, since racial segregation has just been abolished and much work is being done to fix the way the system was set up.
The introduction of new scholarship on slavery focused on how enslaved people had built a culture of their own, disregarding their enslavement.
An aspect we have seen carrying over from the 60s has been on the rise in protests in peace ceasefire in the Vietnam War.
Demonstrators were fighting against a war that they did not believe in, and many were also extremely against the draft, recruiting healthy men over the age of 18 to 65 to fight in the war. Many believed that if they were old enough to fight, then they should be old enough to vote.
Their demands seem to work though, Maggie, and at least there's been a fair change for these protesters. In 1971, Nixon ratified the 26th Amendment, lowering the voting age from 21 to 18.
One significant change we've observed, however, has been the music of this time period. While music of the 60s and early 70s had a singer-songwriter such hippie focus, disco has been on the rise.
Founded by the gay community, disco and punk rock showcased a desire for self-expression and rebellion against conformity.
One of the first disco clubs, The Loft, ran by David Manusco, set up the foundation of disco subculture. The Loft became a space where everyone was accepted regardless of race or sexual orientation.
The culture the Loft had created had become the subculture for disco as a genre, and with disco gaining popularity, people's acceptance of others grew as well.
While it's safe to say that the 70s were an extremely turbulent time, full of turmoil whether it was on American soil or off it.
Becoming the first president in American history to resign after what happened with the Watergate scandal, Nixon's departure in 1974 left the country in a state of disarray and distrust. American citizens were becoming increasingly disillusioned with the government and started becoming more critical of politics and politicians in general.
But there was also undeniable growth and change during the 70s. With the rise of social activism and emerging countercultures, the 70s brought progress in the American landscape that is still reflected today.
Thank you.
Thank you.